the throwaway god was kind of like just a sort of silly one, and that's Karen, the goddess of perceived injustice. But she's not very good at working out what is correct injustice and what is just perceived injustice. And she fills people with her anger. So when someone acts out and wants to see the manager, they are literally taken over by the spirit of Karen, which is something we actually all recognize as a society, which is why we respond. We all go to them, all right, Karen, all right, Karen. We are trying to placate the goddess behind them, not the...
Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lawn, and each episode, I and a guest will unpack a fiction trope with an eye for character development and narrative structures. Make sure to look for Speculative Sandbox on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation. Leave comments or questions, or let us know what other tropes we should cover. When the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one. Chances are, if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you're familiar with polytheism, the belief of many gods. The Greek gods are arguably the most famous in Western culture. Love is attributed to Aphrodite, war and conflict to Ares, wine to Dionysus, the sun to Apollo, and so on. If future theologians were to examine artifacts from today, what conclusions could they reach about our society that could be interpreted as modern gods? Author Andrew Dart joins me to discuss our modern rituals and belief systems. Which modern god do you subscribe to? And what is the sacrifice in doing so? I'm excited to talk about today's topic, which is all about modern gods. And I think the way that we started talking about this was, I believe you either tweeted in response to something or you had an idea about something. Do you remember that?
I responded to something on Instagram that you posted.
Yes. So, and then I was like, let's talk about it. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So, share with me a little bit about your current projects. Tell me about yourself. What are you working on anything right now?
Yes, I'm currently working on my second novel. I've just finished sort of my second draft take on it. I'm self-publishing, so it's kind of hard to say where exactly you are in the process without anyone saying, you've now done this, you've now done this. So as far as I'm concerned, I've just finished my second draft, and it's really hard to describe. The way other people have described it is Stranger Things with cats.
Oh,
so it's effectively the story about a group of household cats who find that there are creatures coming into their neighborhood and threatening children, but the humans can't see them, so they have to do something about it. And so I'm working on that. Still got a fair bit to go, I think, but I'm quite happy with how it is so far.
That's a great feeling. I've been agonizing over the same manuscript for the past year, and I'm finally in a place where I feel comfortable about it. Speaking of cats, have you played the video game Stray yet?
I haven't. I want to, but I don't have any of the platforms.
Oh, yeah. Same situation. So what me and my kids do is it's terrible. We watch the YouTube walkthroughs. So we're not playing at all, but we're enjoying it at least. And it's a really cool idea because it's like this world that this cat is exploring, and you can only navigate it and like accomplish things based off of what a cat could do, right? And sneaking in and out of buildings and climbing things that a human would probably have a lot of difficulty doing. So it's kind of cool to see a different perspective where a cat has the upper hand, and there's a reason why it's the main character. So that's really cool that you have something similar going on as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've encountered those sort of issues in writing the story, in that you have situations where a human would go in and they'd solve the problem within minutes, but you have a cat trying to do the same thing. So in one part of the story, they have to move a bucket from one end of the room to another for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
And humans doing it, you walk in, pick up the bucket, you move it. A cat trying to do it, that's suddenly a big task for them to do, and and it allows me to sort of put tension in where there wouldn't be with human characters.
Gotcha. Do your cats randomly knock things off countertops?
They don't.
Okay.
But I'm sure they would if I wrote them too much stuff about them hanging around at home.
Yeah.
Uh,
In the story game, you can, and it's actually part of
awesome.
like you knock things over and you find like clues. And in one scene, apparently there's these two humanoid type robots playing chess, and you can jump on their chessboard and wreck the game, and they get upset at you. I just thought it was
My cats do that. They, whenever
yeah.
I'm playing board games, they like to jump up and get involved. So
You can totally tell that the creators love cats, and
yes.
I love that. So, okay, I wanted to prepare for you you said you were nervous. I wanted to prepare you some
Yes.
rapid fire icebreaker questions.
Oh
Just
goodness, that's even
which
the worst.
I don't know if that makes it worse or better.
Yeah.
This is only supposed to be fun. I figured it kind of opens up the conversation a little bit. So we're going to be talking
Okay.
about modern gods, and by that, it's like, okay, how are we looking at today's world and applying the model of like the classic Greek gods or any other type of mythology onto today's world. But of the classical gods, which would you say is your favorite?
Ooh, I had a think about this. I spent like a long time trying to work out what my answer was for it. And then one of my colleagues at work mentioned, "Oh, do you remember this from when you were younger? There was a TV series that I used to watch called Monkey." And I was like, "Yes, that is my answer." So my answer is Sun Wukong from Chinese mythology, who was known as the Monkey King. Now, most people might know him a little bit better by his Japanese version of the name, which is Son Goku, who is the inspiration for the character from Dragon Ball Z.
Mm-hmm.
And he is, I'm not technically sure if he's a god or not. He was in the ranks of the gods, but he kind of was too much of a troublemaker and they ended up throwing him out. So, yeah, I think that counts as him being a god.
Yeah.
He was born from a dragon egg and a stone egg, I think it was, and just got himself in loads of trouble. He got, like I said, got a job amongst the gods, and when he found out he had the most lowly position amongst the gods, he effectively caused trouble. He let all the horses out of the stables. He got drunk and wandered around the palace and stole the secret of immortality, and then decided to stage a rebellion against the gods. And that's kind of why he got chucked out.
He sounds so fun. I could see why you like him.
But for me, what it was is, like I said, there was a TV series when I was younger called Monkey. It came out the same year I was born. And it was effectively a retelling of the 16th century novel Journey to the West, and is the story of a monk called Tripitaka, who is tasked with traveling from China to India to collect some holy scriptures. And she enlists the monkey god as her protector along the way. And it's kind of a forerunner to things like Power Rangers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have these superpowered characters. So there was Monkey, Sandy, who was a water monster and an ex-cannibal, Pigsy, who was a pig monster consumed by lust and gluttony. And you would have these three characters guarding this monk, and they would wander into a village which was under attack, and then they would go fight the monster of the week and then wander off again. Nice. And I absolutely loved it. And Monkey had these great powers. I mean, he'd already stolen the gift of immortality, but he also had, he fought with a staff, which he could change the size of. So he could make it massive to beat people with, or make it really small and hide it in his ear so people didn't think he had a weapon. He could fly on clouds. He would like call a cloud and then surf along on a cloud. And one of the fun powers he had is he could pull the chest hairs out of his body, blow on them, and summon an army of monkeys to fight.
Wow, that's unique.
So yes, the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, is my favorite god. Yeah.
Awesome. I learned so much. That was great. I didn't know about that one. Okay, so then looking at yourself, and who do you think, if gods are real, pull them all out of the sky, right? Like, let's figure out which one would you say you actually most subscribe to? Your lifestyle, your belief system, like who do you think would fall in line with that? My answer to that would be the muses, and that's because I find myself so reliant on them, and I get really frustrated when they leave. And if I could
Ah,
put up, do rituals and set up like an altar to them and like, please come, I need your help with this writing. And speaking, this is relates to another question I'm going to ask you, but to me, it's 100%. I live and die by those muses.
you're not going to go as far as kidnapping one and locking them in your basement like in Sandman.
I was going to ask you
No?
about Sandman.
Okay, that's all right then. That's a difficult question. I feel that I care a lot about sort of learning things about the world and about truth and getting to the bottom of the things regardless of whether it's a comfortable truth and things like that. It's something I kind of view myself as what I would call a skeptic. It's scientific skepticism, and that sort of approach to the world. So I'm trying to think of gods that kind of embody that. Am I thinking? Is it Athena who's like a god of knowledge, or maybe I'm misremembering?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, Athena, goddess of knowledge and war.
Maybe something like that. The war side, I'm not so. Well, I'm a grump. I can be a right grump. I definitely have a sense of right and wrong where I'm like, someone crosses the long line. I'm like, no, that's not right.
You're a knowledgeable grump. That works.
Yes, a knowledgeable grump. There, let's go with that.
Okay, fair enough. And who do you think gets a bad rap out of all the gods? It's unfair. We treat them, we perceive them just, it's unfair. They deserve better.
See, it's really hard. The only one, the answer that comes to mind is one that I'm not sure he gets a bad rap anymore, and that's Loki. And I think maybe that's because he's so popular these days. That's why
he is Tom Hiddleston.
But,
for me.
But,
so
but even in the mythology, he gets a bad rap. He is the one who often comes along and solves the problems that Thor causes in the mythology. And so talk about taking one for the team. There's the story of Loki when there's I can't remember the exact details. There's a wild horse causing problems. So Loki turns himself into a female horse, seduces the male horse, becomes impregnated by the male horse, and then gives birth to I think a 8-legged horse that Thor then rides or something.
Wow!
I'm butchering that story, I guarantee. But yeah, I think he gets a bad rap because in the Norse mythology, he is always coming in and fixing the problems caused by the other gods. I think he gets fed up with it and then storms off, which is why he's generally viewed as the villain. But
wow, so he's like what is it in dysfunctional families, he is there's a word for it when you're the child that kind of gets shat on.
Yes, yeah,
which is unfairly so, and Thor is the golden child.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, sucks. Wow. Okay, I think that's a really good argument for Loki. I wasn't aware that he was so proactive, and because I'm not as aware of I just see Loki as like the trickster king or trickster god. But that's kind of cool to think that this is someone who's actually creatively solving problems for his entire family. But then Thor gets to like enjoy the splendor and the attention.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so then my last question was: have you watched Sandman?
I have, yes. We finished it the other day, so yeah.
Including the new episode 11 that they just dropped?
Yes, I very much enjoyed the little cat story.
Yes, I was
absolutely watching it going, he's stealing my ideas somehow from the past. But there's a couple of little elements that are in that where I'm like, that I've included in my book. It's not the same sort of story at all, but I was watching it going, that was my idea.
Did you hate that? It's so, yeah, well, when I was watching, I think it was the death episode 6, where he goes to the bar and every 100 years he meets with that gentleman. It's actually very similar to V.E. Schwab's book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's the same idea of someone who has immortality for whatever circumstance and continues to meet that person over and over. But the difference that she brings to the story, and she's friends with Neil Gaiman, I believe. Is it Gaiman or Gaiman? I want to make sure I say this. Gaiman.
I'm pretty sure it's Gaiman.
Okay. The difference is that there's a nice gender bent to it because it's a female who is trying to escape the limitations and societal expectations on her gender back in the day, got her immortality, and then her curse is that no one can how it's like a gift and a curse. The gift is that she asked people, she wanted to be free of people's expectations. So he made her forgettable. So you meet someone and they forget you the minute you walk out that door, but she has immortality and she will never die until she learns to regret that wish that she made. So it's a really interesting concept, but I like when I was watching the episode, I was like, oh, this is familiar. And then I realized he influenced her, but she was able to give it a fresh spin. So that'll be your challenge as you're coming out
Yes.
with new cat
Oh,
stories.
it's always the way. I mean, me and one of my friends work, he's very creative as well. And we often wander around the village that we work in at lunchtime talking about these things. And almost without fail, one of us will go, oh, I've had this new idea. And then so I'll explain it to him. And then he'll turn around and go, oh, you mean like in this program or in this book? And I'll like,
I hate that. You're like, damn it.
And you're like, I totally came up with it. I've not seen or read those things.
Yes. Well, then I'm afraid that if I were to put a story out there and then I get like canceled because I, supposedly stole it from someone, and I'm like, no, we just have the same muse.
Yeah, exactly. They apparently don't have as many ideas as you think.
Exactly. Blame the muse.
Exactly.
Okay, so I thought an interesting way to kind of explain my approach to today's challenge, which was to come up with modern day equivalents of gods, or at least the same gods but translated into today's circumstances, is the Netflix show Black Mirror. They made a standalone movie called Bandersnatch. Have you seen that?
No, I've seen some of the episodes of Black Mirror, but I've not seen that one.
So the great thing about Bandersnatch, it's very influenced by the 80s of the build your own adventure stories. And they're trying to create a build your own adventure video game. And the main character is designing his game. He's coding it out. And he has to write everything on paper. And he has to write, the pathways that where the paths split, the branching. Yeah. So he draws those branches to show scenario transitioning to scenario and all the choices you make. But unknowingly, that symbol is evoking a god or a demon. He has no idea. He's not intentionally doing it, but because he keeps drawing it, the god starts to get pulled into his world and his world starts to fall apart. And there's some devastating outcomes. And of course, the entire structure of Bandersnatch is you get to choose your own adventure. You're clicking next and which pathways to go to. So then by the end of it, you feel wrapped up into this weird lore of this build your own adventure symbol that ends up being demonic. You had no idea, but now you're suffering the consequences. So I thought it was so interesting to think about how we can examine behaviors that may not be intentionally theological, but could be ultimately interpreted as such when you incorporate groupthink, rituals, and belief systems. So I thought that was like a cool way to think about, all right, how are we going to be looking at modern gods today? So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what is the purpose of gods? Like what role do they play in society?
So, yeah, I was been thinking about, this is one of the main things I've been thinking about. And I think there are a number, I think when we're talking about gods here, we're definitely talking about sort of the Greek type of gods rather than like the omni gods of like Christianity and things like that. Mm-hmm. Because you can't really have, I don't think, a modern omni god. You can have modern smaller gods, I think is a way of sort of putting it. And I think the roles they played in history is firstly as explanations for things we don't understand. So, why is that mountain spitting fire? Well, because Vulcan is angry and, in his forge or whatever. And so, people have questions, they don't understand them. And so they come up with stories, and the characters in the stories are usually gods. Mm-hmm. Likewise, they act as sources of guidance, and sort of, they help address difficult moral questions, I think. They tell us how we should live. You had in the past societies, they were trying to work all these things out and things. And I think it's easier in that sort of way to go, you shouldn't kill that person. And they say, why not? And they go, because the gods will be angry with you and they will punish you. And so that's a way of sort of enforcing it. You basically tell them there's this force that's greater than them and that it can do something to them if they don't toe the line. Likewise, if they do toe the line, then they'll be rewarded by the gods and everything will be sunshine and puppies. And I think also in a way they provide like comfort and protection. There's this idea, the idea of an afterlife is very strongly related to gods. The gods have to live somewhere. They live in a heavenly realm. What happens when we die? Well, we go to join them in some way, and everything's wonderful. And so it gives people a comfort of what will happen to after death. When they lose loved ones, it's okay because they've gone to be with the gods. I think those are the sort of three main roles that gods fulfill.
I think that's a great summary, and it's a really interesting look at human behaviors and how we as society interact with each other, particularly the one where you can use the idea of a god as leverage for controlling others and telling them, do this because this god wants it, and if you, like you said, do well, we reward you. If you don't do well, we punish you in the name of this deity. And I also see it as like you can use gods to alleviate yourself of blame. Right. I didn't wage this war. Ares made me do it.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You can completely free yourself of like mass genocide. If you could say, oh, yeah, the god Ares thought I should do it. This is good for all of mankind. And I am the chosen one.
There's kind of a sort of a mafia type thing to it. It's like, I don't want to break your legs, but Don Giovanni is telling me that I have to do this. And, it's very much the same thing. You have the priest saying, well, if it was up to me, I'd let you go, but the gods demand that I sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
and it makes it so that who are you to question the gods? You might question the priest, but you're not going to question the gods who he's speaking for. And yeah.
And it's terrifying for the people who aren't in that position, the ones that are in trouble, because how do you question or fight someone that supposedly has that authority and connection to the deity? All right, so let's set the stage. We are looking at present day. Oh, I put Americans, but you're not America, right? I wrote this before I knew. I was just present day civilization. So what do we have to work with? In America, we have a very strong capitalistic society. And because of that, I feel like we create a lot of problems so that we can then sell people solutions.
Oh, yes, definitely. Same over here. So.
Okay. Which it is a very interesting push and pull when you talk about like wants versus needs. Then over here, we have our government system set up. We also have our social media, influencer culture, all those things. So what else do we have to work with?
So some of the ideas that I came up with is we are increasingly a global community. And so in a way that we've not been in the past. So, often you find yourself in situations where you might have friends that live all over the planet. And especially you talked about like social media and influencer culture and things like that. There might be people all over the world, thousands of people all over the world and stuff, but you might not know your next door neighbor. And so you have this thing where, we're trying to, we're interacting with the world as a whole, and except our local communities are not particularly strong because, you might have a really strong online community, but like I said, you don't know your neighbor. I mean, I've lived in where I live now for 4 years, and I know like 2 of my neighbours. I don't think I've ever talked to any of them, but obviously I know some people, not that many people online because I don't tend to do gaming or anything like that online. So, but there's people all over the world that I know, so there's that idea of a sort of global community. Related to that is the increasingly online society. We do, for example, we're talking online, especially with the pandemic and that lot. We've pretty much spent 2 years where most of our communication is online rather than face to face. And I think these are definitely, problems that the world is facing, both in America and in the UK, especially.
It is really interesting when you talk about that shift, because back in the day when we didn't have internet, you hear about grandparents, right? We met each other, we went to the same high school, we lived down the street, and then today's dating world, you're meeting people all over the place. That is just a huge span change. But then you think about deities and how religion plays a role, and many times those gods are could be based off of your geographic makeup in that one area. So for instance, in parts of Asia with their water dragons were associated with weather, flooding, all those things. And so there would be temples that were built up in those areas to placate, and appeal to the dragon kings in hopes that they could make sure that the weather was nicer. And what's interesting about going global is I'm not just aware of my monsoon rain going on out here. I live in the southern Arizona desert, but I'm aware of the heat, the terrifying heat weather up in Washington State, or I believe the UK was going through
Yeah,
a
we were
heat.
recently been ridiculously hot.
Yeah. So I'm aware of all these things. I'm aware of tsunamis, along in the Pacific Ocean. And it's a heightened level of stress that comes with that increased awareness.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the other things I've got here, is that we're increasingly dealing with problems that affect the entire world and require mass cooperation between nations. And that's something that is very modern. You know,
Mhm.
it's, in the time of like the Greek gods and stuff like that, you might worry about maybe the next village. But you weren't worrying about a country tens of thousands of miles away from you, or whatever, and knowing that how that country fares has an effect on you. So for example, the war in Ukraine, with Ukraine being a massive exporter of wheat, or one of the grain products,
Mhm.
and how that suddenly has an effect on countries all over the place. When if you even heard about that sort of thing in the past, it might be years later, someone might stumble into a bar and tell you about, oh, I was in this war like several years ago, and that'd be the first you hear about it. But these days, we have faced worldwide problems, pandemics, global warming. These are things that affect the whole planet, and
Mhm.
the actions of people, in a country who are chopping down all their trees, for example, affect people on the other side of the world. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Now I feel all somber. But
Yeah, me too.
but it's a reality that we're facing, and it's interesting to look at when you think about how it's happened so fast, our global awareness, and how we've just our overall knowledge of each other has increased compared to like the last several thousands of years of humanity. The evolution of knowledge has been amazing. So then when we look at today's society, how do we know what are we looking at when we want to categorize something as a modern god, or practices following a modern god?
So I found this I found quite as a difficult question to sort of get my head pinned down on. I think the angle I ended up sort of approaching it from was thinking about where modern gods might come from, and then we'd be able to identify the sort of things related to them. So thinking about where modern gods are going to come from led me, of course, we've already talked about Neil Gaiman, and he wrote American Gods and things like that, and he, as well as people like Terry Pratchett, made popular the idea of anthropomorphic personification, I believe is the term they use, where gods come into being because people believe in them.
Mhm.
And Neil Gaiman also pointed out that in modern times we don't worship gods in the same way people did in the past. We're not building altars and leaving sacrifices and stuff. But what we do is we give our time, and this is a resource that we only have a limited amount of, and we can't get more. And so giving your time to something is a form of worship. And so if you give your time to a hobby or a cause, or spending all your time on social media, we already talked about social media and stuff like that, you are in effect giving of yourself in a very meaningful way. And so if we look at, talk about social media as well, there's also the idea of when you put yourself on social media, you are giving a part of yourself to that. So that could be viewed as you are offering up little parts of your soul to a god of social media, for example. So with that sort of idea of the activities we engage in and stuff, I think you can start building ideas of the rituals and the equivalent of temples and things like that. So one of the ideas I had was nerd culture.
Okay.
And so if you look at sort of nerd culture, they do sort of have their own sort of ways of being, as with all different cultures. So you might have, for example, comic book shops are the temples, or a place like Forbidden Planet. I don't know if that's in America as well. It's have it in the UK. It's a comic book and model shop, and you go there for all your Marvel stuff and your books on fantasy and things like that. And so these are temples. These are like-minded people coming together and talk about things that they love in these cultures. You have maybe your yearly pilgrimage to Comic-Con is a thing. You have people dressing up in costumes of their favorite characters, quoting lines from their favorite books and TV programs. Having wearing clothes with symbols of the things they enjoy. Greeting each other with a Vulcan salute.
Oh wow! I just think of like wearing Iron Man clothes and preaching the word of Iron Man.
Yes, exactly. And I think if you think of the worship side of it in the sense of the time and energy you spend on it, and obviously money in this aspect, then you have that kind of literally they're worshiping with their money, with their time, their resources, these gods of geek culture. And I think there's also the gain can be from that. So this kind of goes back to the social media thing, that if you give of yourself, you can potentially get fame and fortune as a reward from, and being willing to feed the algorithm every day by posting lots of videos and and doing what it says is popular and things. And I think that's the way I look at it. Look at the idea of the god and the situation first, and then you can look at the groups and the things that people are doing and see the rituals and the temples and that sort of thing within that.
That's such a great analysis. I love that. I am also I partake in the annual pilgrimage to Comic-Con. I have one actually next weekend. I'll be promoting this podcast there actually. So cool. We'll hopefully get some more listeners from it. But going off of what you're talking about is like looking for the deity, the entity, and then looking at the things around it that support it. It makes me think of a TikTok video that someone posted. I don't know if it originally could have come from YouTube. It's a countryside, and there's cars trying to make their way down the road, but they've stopped. The car in the front had stopped for, I'm guessing, geese to cross. But at some point, the geese got turned around in circles, and they started circling the car, like this huge, massive group of geese. And they the music they played with it was so funny, because it was kind of showing like almost like an alien song, like something is happening with that car, and like the geese are worshiping the car because they're circling the car. And I was like, that's exactly what you look for, right? You look for interesting behaviors in groups of people where they're kind of performing something that feels ritual or at least repetitive. They're all doing the same thing, and there's like an object that you can center it in. And of course, that do geese like circling things? I don't know. But immediately I want to be like, oh, who's in the car? Knock on the window. What's going on here? It just made me think about that as far as like, how do you identify behaviors in the world that could lead to, a modern day god? And I was right there with you with the algorithm. I think it's so interesting how over the few years, the algorithm has gotten more and more tight, and we are getting more and more desperate. It's almost like the equivalent of a god that has gone quiet. I don't know, I'm thinking of Dionysus. If he would go quiet, and you have like a huge why am I blanking on this word? When you don't have a lot of rainfall, so your grapes and your vineyards are
Drought.
dying. Drought. Thank you. um, and and so then you get more desperate, and that was when people started resorting to pretty awful human sacrifices. The idea that scatter the blood all over the fields and a rain will come. I remember watching that. I took a Greek myth class in college, and I was a little bit scarred by that. But it's the same idea. Our algorithm used to be incredibly giving, and we would put something out there, the TikTok of yesterday, where you could reach thousands, hundreds of thousands of people very, very easily. And you got used to that. And people who have been wanting that fame, and this is their chance to break out, because the world's changing. You can't just wait to find an agent. You got to make a name for yourself early on your own. And so slowly the algorithm started to choke you out. Until now, it's almost impossible. And now you have to play all these games to try to beat the algorithm. And it's like the people that are wondering where the rain is coming, and they start resorting to certain behaviors. And every now and then you hit the jackpot and the rain clouds come and you go, okay, that reaffirms this behavior. But really it's the damaging effects too. I mean, murdering people, right? To try to get the rain god to come, to get, in this case, it was Dionysus. Think about the mental health that people have to go through when they're like trying to appeal to the algorithm god, and they're just not getting it. And the algorithm knows to feed you just enough, just like casinos, the rule of large numbers. They always win in the end, and you're always losing, but they need to keep you there and addicted.
Yeah, totally. I think that the some kind of social media. I love the idea of the algorithm as a god, but yeah, definitely some kind of social media, because I think social media is a very obvious way to me of driving people to do more and more and more to get the same kind of reward. And it very much does feel like people are offering up pieces of themselves. And it's one of the channels that I will follow, a number of times I've heard him mention that this isn't the kind of video I would used to be doing, but I can't get the views if I do what I used to do. I have to push the boundary. I have to do these challenges and things like that in order to get the same sort of response. And it's completely true. People, I feel they're having to do more and more to satisfy the insatiable appetite of the algorithm. But
the algorithm is not a loving god.
No. So it gives just enough to keep the worshippers happy, but it feeds on them more than anything else, I think.
What other gods do you have?
So I've got, kind of related to the algorithm. I came up with one I called, where's my piece of paper? Called Toxtagram, who is the goddess of distraction, the mistress of the infinite scroll, the source of procrastination, and the revealed self. And it's very much related to social media and about how, as I've said before, the idea of people spend their time consuming and they put other things on hold. I'm just going to sit there and read a few more TikToks or something like that, and they dedicate large parts of their lives to just scrolling through things. Whereas on the other side, you've got people who are developing the content, and they are literally sacrificing parts of themselves to this god who is a god. It provides some forms of entertainment in response, can make some people famous, things like that. But again, it's just if you think of it as people offering up parts of their soul, it is literally feeding on the collective souls of all of the subscribers to these various social media channels.
It's interesting because, we're talking about the idea of souls, and we can think back to, mythologies where it's like, I think of Hercules cartoons, right? Where you have like this soul is this little gray bubble thing that moves through, and you can see that, it feels very fantastical. But when you talk about the soul as far as like your well-being and your mental health, and you think about people who pour their whole being into a job, whether it's creating the algorithm or just any work in general, hustle culture. And your soul's getting eaten away, and you can tell because your mental health is suffering. And same by those people that are consuming social media, and they're as you're saying, the endless scroll. I've seen so many influencers now decide to jump off because it's been hurting them negatively. So when we say transferring and affecting and giving up of your soul, it's like you can see that, you feel it in
Yeah.
in your own health.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's it's a worrying thing to do. I mean, I'm just as bad. I'm on Instagram and YouTube. I'm not on TikTok or I can't remember what the others are called, Twitter,
Twitter.
or Facebook or anything like that. But yeah, I know I spend way too much time on YouTube, and I know that I pick up my phone way too many times a day to check Instagram and things like that. And it's definitely a part of me that, when I'm doing it, I'm like, I could be doing something better. I should be writing rather than watching YouTube videos. But I'll just finish this one, or maybe the next couple, and then I'll go do something. And yeah, it
Yeah,
sucks you in.
no one's safe. And for
No.
me, it started out as a form of play, which I think is incredibly important for people. And when you get stuck in the grind and working the 9 to 5 or longer, you need that play. Your work isn't always necessarily your play. And social media made it, there's games on your phone and you can talk to people and you chat and your social life is there. But then you introduce the algorithm, which then caters to negativity and outrageous, clickbaity headlines. And
Yeah.
then the quality in which you start to consume is no longer fun. It's a little frightening. And so for me, it's like I value the ability to kind of like stimulate my brain to break up, you and I both in creative endeavors. It helps to just kind of stimulate, like poke at your brain, right? But
Yeah.
then it's the way the world has evolved. It comes with a cost. It's like when you strike a deal with the devil. It comes with a wish and it comes with a trick kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm in the same boat. My other god I actually decided to analyze Hestia, who is the family god, because I'm a little worried about Hestia right now. I feel like she's either gone cold. So Hestia is the family god and she takes care of the hearth. And the idea that she keeps your home warm and fuzzy and all that good stuff. But I feel like that hearth has grown cold, and I'm looking at the systems we've eventually created in our societies where the family center is not highly valued. And it didn't really dawn on me that this was the case here in America, at least, until I actually got pregnant. About 10 years back and started a family of my own. And then I realized that the system is set up to be a lot of obstacles. And, you have the pressures of your work counteracting with the pressures of the family. And they're not sympathetic to either, right? You're going to sacrifice one over the other. And hopefully in today's modern society, you have a happy medium where people understand you. The answer isn't necessarily to not work, because the high cost of living has made it so that it's essential that you have a 2-income home, at least where I'm living. And it's just beneficial that way to be able to support your family. And I grew up in a household where my mother didn't work. And if my dad lost his job, I told myself I would never, ever experience that level of stress, because I wanted that added security of 2 jobs in the household. So anyway, um, when you are in a working place, you're gonna have to tell me how the UK is, because in America, we are known for our shitty maternity leave, sick days. When your child gets sick, you can usually count a week for them and a week for you. And that would basically deplete your entire year of sick days. And I was just like, what is going on here? And even when my kids started going to school, I realized if I had a stay-at-home parent, I would be able to juggle the demands of everything way better. But that just wasn't how our household was structured at the time. So it's even the idea of the American dream, which is to buy a home. Buying a home now is very, very expensive, and they want you to move out of your house to buy a home. They movement away from the intergenerational homes, because then if they could break you up into 4 people living in 4 homes, but imagine all that debt that's now being put on that family. And so I look at the the family structure, the stress that's placed on them. During this pandemic, I think parents of young children were hit so hard because you were expected to work at home and teach your kid at the same time, and your kid didn't want to learn, right? So anyway, I felt like that was kind of me analyzing the systems that have broken down Hestia. And I'm hoping that with existing policies, my workplace has gotten way more flexible, that we can start bringing her back to life.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, I mean, I've worked in various different places in the UK with different rules and regulations. I mean, the company I work for now, when I first started there, was a very small company. You know, we were just run out of a couple of room building in a little village, and we didn't really get sick leave. Basically, if you were sick, you just didn't get paid. And so, but now that company's been taken over by a international company, and suddenly I get sick leave and get paid for it if I'm not feeling very well. And it feels really strange, because I'm kind of used to the idea of not taking sick. If I have to be really ill to take sick leave, but now I've got the option. If I'm not feeling up to it, I can't take a day off without having to worry. But yeah, I agree with you. There's building up a good home protection gods. There's an idea in I think it's the Jim Butcher Dresden Files books, with the threshold of houses, and how in the old days the threshold was a very important thing for keeping evil forces out. And it would be because all the people would live in this houses together, and there'd be lots of family and love and friendship in there. But these days, you rent a place, you don't buy a house, so it's not really yours. And you might have a housemate who changes when they have to move town, and so the thresholds are very weak, so that the evil forces out there have easier access to our lives and can make them more miserable. And I think, yeah, the god of hearth and home definitely is waning of late.
Yeah, I think about societal shame, that when millennials started moving back in with their parents, the shame that was associated with that. Why aren't you moving out and being independent? And it's like, okay, I mean, if someone wants to choose that, I mean, I was able to move out from my parents' house and support myself, but I also understand the systemic issues that made it so my peers had a more difficult time. But the idea that we are separating all day long, when you look at today's lifestyle, 8-9 hours out of the house, working the grind in a separate place than your spouse, and your kids are somewhere else too. It's just an interesting concept. And I think in Europe, I've heard, I mean, this is a great, you tell me like how accurate this is, but at least in France, I believe there's a lot of time that's dedicated to family, like lunches, you go home for lunch. But I know that your school days might also be kind of long. I'm just thinking out loud now.
I don't know what it's like in France. I can't speak for them. Yeah, I mean, I work from home a lot of the time at the moment. Going to the office a few days a week. We're still sort of easing back into office work following the pandemic and that lot. But even working from home, I work in one room. My partner works in the other room, and we see each other a couple of times a day, and we're in the same building. And so, yeah, I completely get that side of it. Yeah.
What is your thought of, I feel like the role that the media plays? Because when I like, either there as a standalone deity or not, because I know that when we talk about systemic change, when people were first going home, the media spouted all these headlines about how this isn't good for you. And then when the pandemic we got to this point, and people were legitimately saying, we don't want to go back, we found out that we like it home, then the media there was like a war, being presented in the headlines. And I always felt like it was always leveraging corporate interest, because corporations were not happy about, not having that oversight. And so whenever I was reading the headlines, I'm like, is this real or is this bot? So the confusion that's presented in these circumstances, I would love, and I work in PR, I love to believe in the legitimacy and the ethics of, news for everybody. But I'm also aware that things can be bought. And so I'm just like, what are your thoughts on the role the media plays as far as human behaviors in modern gods?
I think if we think of the media as a god, I think it's a god that feeds on fear,
Mm.
negative emotions. You know, I think there's statistics that show that the murder rates in places like America have absolutely plummeted over the years, but the reporting of murders has gone through the roof. And so people think they live in a more dangerous society when actually the statistics show the opposite. And I think, yeah, very much especially the news media and sort of that side of it is, if it's a god that feeds on the fear and creates, you know, things for people to be scared of, and distances people from each other, and reasons why you can't trust your neighbor, and you know, is just breaking people up into smaller and smaller groups so that it can prey on the individual fears of those people.
The
Yeah,
generational war, the generational age war, where you
yes,
can't, they've sicked you against your own grandpa, against
yeah,
your own child, which
yeah.
that's another way that we're losing Hestia. You can't even trust the people in your own family.
No, exactly. And there's all more and more ways to sort of divide people up. And I think that this plays in with all the other things we've talked about. You know, um, we're kind of sort of building a pantheon of gods, and I wonder if, as well as feeding on our time and our, you know, devotion and our fear and things like that, there is definitely elements of singling out, you know, your flock. So you have the young people are drawn in by social media, whereas the older generations might still be watching the news channels and stuff, and they're drawn in by the stories that tells and things like that. And so yeah, there's lots of dividing up of the gods' flocks by the different approaches to gathering people.
Interesting how something that is kind of creating the idea of community is actually very divisive.
Yes, yeah. I mean, yeah, you look at things like social media and that, but it's very divisive. You know,
Uh-huh.
it's it advertises itself as a way that you can bring all your friends together and stuff, but it doesn't. It just creates little cliques, and you know, you have all the people over one side who believe one extreme position, and the people on the other who, you know, believe the opposite, and you know, they'll throw insults at each other, but they'll never listen to each other, never interact on a sort of human level. It's and you know, social media and the internet allows people to be their worst selves in many ways. You're hidden behind a screen. You can say things to people online that you'd never dream of saying to them face to face. And I think if we view that as an aspect of what the gods are trying to generate, there's, you know, the feeding of those on those negative emotion, on those hostility of dividing people and weakening human connections in order to, you know, feed themselves on things.
Chilling. Do you have any other God examples?
Yes, I've got one. I've got two. One's just a silly sort of throwaway thing, but I had an idea for a kind of I want to say like a two-faced god, or more of maybe a pair of twin gods might be a better way of viewing it. And they're both gods of knowledge and information,
Okay.
but fulfill very different roles and have very different views on things. So on the one hand, you've got Google, who is a god of knowledge, and this god represents the sort of sum total of human knowledge and information. Google is a very generous and enthusiastic dispenser of this knowledge, you know, always willing to try and answer your questions. It's a guide to the lost, a teacher, you know, to people, a performer when they seek entertainment. But a lot of the time it cares more about giving you the information as quickly as possible. It's not a particularly moral being. I think it's sort of an amoral being, because it doesn't care if you're looking up how to make the perfect gift for grandma, or, you know, where can I buy an assault weapon. It doesn't care. It just cares about providing you with the information, and it cares about gathering more and more knowledge to itself so that it can, grow its banks of information, and to make you keep coming to it for information and for answers. On the other side, its twin is a god I'm calling Jack, spelt J-A-Q, or short for just asking questions.
Okay.
And this is the god of the conspiracy theorist, the god of the information that they, all in capital letters, don't want you to know. It views itself as the one that really cares about the truth. But in many ways, all it cares about is finding answers that Google won't tell you. I think there is a very fine line between sort of conspiracy theories and mythology. So something I spend way more time than is healthy looking into is the flat earth conspiracy theory, which I find the people who believe that absolutely fascinating. And I think there is a definite aspect of mythology in there. The people who believe in who genuinely believe in the flat earth, they see themselves as the outsiders who really care about the truth. They're the people who are going out and finding the real answers for things. And they live in a world that is full of lies, that is full of powerful forces arrayed against them, that don't want them to know what's really happening, that keep the masses down and control them with this disinformation. And they are, very much the heroes of their own story. And I think a god like Jack's would feed on this, would allow people to find more and more things that seem right, more and more connections that are hidden beneath the surface of the information that the rest of the world knows, and allow people to feel very special because they know the answers that the rest of the world doesn't. And so, these twin gods of knowledge feed in different aspects of our desires for information.
Interesting. So when you were talking two-faced or twin gods, as you were describing this, I envisioned like a figure that, and when you look at him from one direction, he's like, very form, or very function, I should say, where he or she delivers the information you ask for, and it's about, how efficiently can it deliver it to you. And then it turns around, and it's like a more chaotic version of itself, that the information seems more like there's a lot of noise because you're trying to decipher what is real and what's not real. But then you have a lot of energy too, because you have people feeding into the information and adding context for the conspiracies.
Yes.
And how like that entity could, if it's a two-faced entity, how that could be at war with each other. They could be a really interesting character.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it in terms of what we see with like a lot of with Google and social media and stuff like that, there's lots of cracking down on conspiracy theories at the moment. I mean, if you talk to any flat earther, they'll tell you that YouTube is hiding the truth. It won't allow you to search for flat earth videos anymore. It doesn't want you to know the truth going on. So you could have this idea of the Google side of the personality is dominant and is trying to undermine the Jack side of the personality.
So they don't like each other.
No, because they both see themselves as the purveyor of the truth, but the truth that they give is different to what the other one does. And so they are very antagonistic against each other.
I love that. That's so cool. Someone's going to take that idea now. You better.
Yeah, totally, yeah. Knowing my luck, I'll open a book tomorrow and that'll be the premise of it. So.
Wow, I really like that, because you think about the war that is happening right now between information and conspiracies. I also think too about how Google used to be something where I used to go, something's broken on Instagram, what's going on? And it would take me to like some random backwoods like forum, and someone would have the same confusion and I would get an answer. But now I'm noticing that if I have a problem with Instagram or whatever, there's a very special list of curated entries that hit me first on a Google search. And I'm like, I am starting to notice that those with the money have the ability to push their stuff to the top. And they've always had that, the what do they call it? SEO. But now it's getting so strong that I can't find. I'm like, I know I'm not the only person that's having this issue with Instagram, but I can't find anybody. All I'm finding is Instagram's page, and they're not giving me the information I need. It's almost like censorship.
Yes. Yeah. 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 There's definitely the conspiracy people's always going on about censorship and stuff, but I think, yes, you've definitely got a sort of corporate censorship where it's like, the answers are there, but you're going to have to scroll past all these ads first.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas definitely before it wasn't like that. I mean, same sort of thing with YouTube. We were talking about how the algorithm has changed that. I remember being a fairly early adopter of YouTube, where it was really quite basic, and you definitely didn't get the same sort of feel of, here's what's popular, here's what you must do in order to get followers. And there would be, I still follow a lot of the same channels, but they would be very niche sort of things. This is a discussion about this aspect of philosophy or something like that. And those, there'd be lots of people doing very niche things, but these days you can't do that to get the information. So that is in its own way a sort of form of censorship. I think it's it's self-censorship.
Well, yeah, you buy yourself a refrigerator, then you get nothing but fridge content. You're like, I already bought a refrigerator. This doesn't help me. This algorithm isn't working.
Exactly.
So what was your throwaway god?
My throwaway god was kind of like just a sort of silly one. And that's Karen, the goddess of perceived injustice. And she is a goddess who cares desperately about, justice and making sure people are treated fairly, but she's not very good at working out what is correct injustice and what is just perceived injustice. And she fills people with her anger. And so when someone acts out and wants to see the manager, they are literally taken over by the spirit of Karen, which is something we actually all recognize as a society, which is why we all go to them, all right, Karen, we are trying to placate the goddess behind them, not the person themselves.
Oh, that's amazing. The idea that this has already happened, the god, we're all subconsciously aware of it, just happened globally. We've acknowledged Karen. Oh, so good. I love that. Well, oh my gosh. So we've been talking for an hour.
Wow.
And it's been amazing. And you were nervous and you had nothing to be nervous about. It was so good.
Thank you.
You have great ideas. I'm so glad that you're able to share them with me. I'm really excited about sharing this conversation with the listeners. Cool. And for those that are listening, if you have ideas for modern gods, please visit Speculative Sandbox on Instagram or Twitter and share that with us, because we would love to hear and share your ideas. So then I actually had planned a send-off question for you, but I moved it to the icebreaker section. So I guess I'll just ask you this. Do you have any final words or promotions that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I guess I'm very bad at sort of self-promotion. I've written a book called Little Words of Wisdom, which is available on Amazon. It's a story about a widower who makes fortune cookies, and one day he discovers that his fortunes all come true and sets off to find out the implications of that. So yeah, that's available on Amazon. I also have an Instagram channel called Rabbit Pirate, which, I put information about the projects I'm working on and things like that, and generally what I get up to. So please come and follow me on that. And the other thing is I'm part of a group called Cambridge Skeptics, and we do a YouTube channel that is kind of I say the opposite to this. We focus very much on fact and science and stuff like that, rather than fiction and speculation. And so we have guests on to talk about various topics of science and things. We just had an astronomer on talking about the James Webb Space Telescope, which was really interesting. And so, yeah, we're on YouTube. There's Cambridge Skeptics if you want to come find us on there.
Speculative Sandbox is a volunteer-run podcast that relies on the collaboration of fellow creators like you. Join the conversation and participate in fun polls and questionnaires on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Interested in being in a future episode? Our DMs are open, or you can email speculativesandbox@gmail.com.